Michael Baca is an elector. He is one of the Hamilton electors, the people who decided, hey, you know what, the whole point of the Electoral College is the actual electors get to decide. Now, there's a lot of people who are angry about the Electoral College because they continue to have a system where the person who wins the popular vote does not win in a so-called democracy. Now, that is one half of the Electoral College, the fact that they do it through the states. The other half of it is that the electors actually get to vote on who the president is, not us. We vote on the electors, and the electors vote on the president. Now, to a lot of people, including me, by the way, that's an outrageous, outdated system that favors the elites. But these Hamilton electors were saying, wait, you don't get to have just one half of that equation. Okay, you vote by the states, but then the electors get to decide. Now, they made a little bit of a revolt here to try to see if they could not have Donald Trump get the presidency, even though he had won the theoretically, see, he had won more votes in the Electoral College. He hadn't won the Electoral College yet until earlier this week on December 19th when they actually voted. And he had lost the popular vote, and it became official later in the week. He lost by about 2.9 million votes. So some of the electors said, hey, maybe this is exactly what the Electoral College is for, when somebody else wins the popular vote, and the person who won the Electoral College is dangerous to the entire world and is clearly unqualified. And even 17% of Trump voters said that they thought he was unqualified for office and voted for him anyway. So that mini revolt did not work. But among the most unique voices there was Michael Baca from Colorado, and he had a unique demand before he cast his vote for the person who won his state, which in this case was Hillary Clinton. So, Michael, welcome to the Young Turks.
Hey, thank you, Cenk.
All right, it's good to have you here, brother. So that was my explanation of what went down, but I'm curious about your explanation. So first, let's talk about how you became an elector in the first place. How do you get to be one of these magical electors who actually gets to vote on who the president is?
Well, in March, I was at caucus, like everyone, a lot of people in Colorado. And then I filled out all the paperwork to be a national delegate, a state delegate, an elector. And I was approached by a group of progressives to say, hey, do you want to be an elector? No one else could vote for Hillary should she become the nominee. At that point in March, I thought Bernie Sanders is going to roll through. I didn't think the momentum would be stopped. And ultimately, Hillary Clinton won the nomination, but I was elected as an elector at the congressional district level for CD1.
So in the primaries, you voted for Bernie Sanders then?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
The caucus for him.
Okay, but then you were selected as an elector, and you were supposed to vote for whoever won at the end of the day, the state of Colorado, right?
Well, I was for the Democratic slate. I was a Democratic elector.
Right.
So the Republicans had their own electors, so on and so forth.
Right, and if Trump had won Colorado, the Republican electors would get to cast their ballots, but he didn't. Hillary Clinton, the Democratic nominee, won. So how many electors are in the state of Colorado?
So there were 9 electors in the state of Colorado. I was the only one before the election results started to roll through, saying that I would potentially withhold my vote for Hillary Clinton for her to stand up for the DAPL protests. But the interview, I wanted her to speak about the WikiLeaks, because those were quite damning, occurring right before the Democratic National Convention. And then you also had the Podesta leaks coming out. And I figured, it was worth having her to talk about. Through the course of being an elector, however, and these past 40 days, I learned that the Russian involvement is serious. So the Democrats can't get away for what they did, but what the Russians did was also bad. So it was kind of, I feel like the Democrats are trying to play down their involvement, even though what they said was accurate in those emails.
Yeah. So, Michael, when did you request that Hillary Clinton, and the press is, by the way, reporting that you requested that she do an interview about DAPL with us at the Young Turks. Is that true?
So I reached out to Jordan Sheraton, and I didn't want to come out necessarily beforehand, but I felt it was important to have my voice saying, hey, you know what, Hillary, if you're going to be the president, I didn't think that she was going to lose like she did. Lose the electoral vote. She won the popular vote, but we have an electoral system. And so I, was like, well, I'll withhold my vote and try to force her hand a little bit to get her to speak the truth to the people. Because ultimately, I think her downfall was that she did not speak the truth to the people.
So before the election, you asked for her to do this interview in order to
Hours
vote for
before,
her?
hours before the results came in. And then once the results came apparent that Donald Trump, um, I, I thought it was going to be 37 Republican electors were going to have to switch. And I came to that conclusion at about 3 a.m. on November 9th. And that's when the whole idea about the Hamilton electors started kicking way with Brett Shafalo and another gentleman named Sean Comfort.
And so when you went to go vote, and I don't know, I know that there's now some legal ramifications to what you did. So you just tell us however much of it you can tell us. On the day, on December 19th, when you were supposed to cast your vote for Hillary Clinton, theoretically, again, I'm of the belief that you can cast your vote for whoever you want. That's the whole point of the Electoral College. And so if people don't like that, they should get rid of the Electoral College, which is what I would support. But when you went to go cast that vote, what did you do?
So there was some issues with the oath beforehand. There was a court case, I believe, like 30, 40 minutes before the oath, we were supposed to sign the oath. And they ruled that the oath that they were attempting to use was unconstitutional, and that Secretary of State Wayne Williams added an emergency rule to create his own oath at the end that was more specific, because he was attempting, or he not attempting, he did threaten electors with perjury, whether that's misdemeanor or felony perjury. It was unclear, but he was threatening electors beforehand, which I believe is illegal. So when we got the oath, there was an issue, and we called the attorneys. They looked it over, and the judge in the governor's office reversed her decision from an hour earlier or so. And so we went forward with this oath, and a couple other electors, Paul Baca and Bob Nemenick, they said that they were voting under duress. I echoed their sentiments, and as a sign of protest, I signed the oath on the floor. Go ahead.
So you signed the new oath, which was more specific, but you signed it under duress.
Yes, absolutely. And then when I went to go sit at the table in the west wing of the foyer, I still at that point had not fully decided who I was going to vote for. But for vice president, I knew I was going to be voting for Tim Kaine, because the whole thought of the Hamilton electors was that we'll be able to deliberate and come to a consensus set of candidates. However, over the course of these past 40 days, that didn't come true. So I felt, since I couldn't vote, I didn't know who to vote for vice president, stick with the will of the people. And so I requested the vice presidential ballot. They didn't give it to me. And so they gave me the presidential ballot. Well, that's when, I ultimately crossed out Hillary Clinton's name and I wrote in Governor Kasich. And then they removed me, and I eventually ended up casting my ballot for vice president on top of the ceremonial pen box.
So you voted for Kasich and Kaine?
Yes, I did.
Which is going to be one of the more unique votes from an elector in American history, where you went back so old school, which makes sense because the founders came up with the Electoral College. Back in the day, they would vote for people from different parties for president and vice president, and that's what you wound up doing. I think you got a good case that you have the will, the intent of the founding fathers on your side.
I think that's what we were going for. And like you said, there is that court case, or the Secretary of State referred this to the Attorney General. So it's basically Republicans are trying to make a legal issue out of a Democrat voting for a Republican. And I do hope at the end of the day this goes to the Supreme Court, so that we can start to look to these outdated laws, because Electoral College came about because of slavery initially, and now there's the whole rule argument. But we have geography collapsing technology right now. That's how we're able to do this interview. So I think that's something we should take a look into.
Yeah, so what is the ultimate ruling you'd want out of the court system, whether it's in the earlier rounds or at the Supreme Court?
Well, I'm fully prepared to be charged. I don't think they will. I think, one, it'd be a massive waste of taxpayer dollars. And my lawyers may be upset at me for saying about this, but, ultimately the truth is important to me. And I think it should be important to everybody, no matter the political ramifications. If the courts decide that the Electoral College does not play a role, I would be in support of that because that's what the court said. At very least, I don't think that there should be 538 individual voices, since we don't have necessarily the freedom to vote how we want. Like you said, there's two-part process to this. Coloradans voted on me to then cast my vote for Hillary, but then in light of the extraordinary information about the Russian hacking, the increased aggression from China in the South China Sea, I think that information the voters did not have available did give me the reason to then cast my vote for a consensus Republican, even though that is something that I was looking forward, attempting to do, reach across party lines and defeat Donald Trump, which we failed.
So your hope there in casting the vote for Kasich was that enough Republican electors would switch over and also vote for Kasich, and you would have created momentum for not a Democratic president, but simply someone that is not Donald Trump. And I have a good sense of why you thought it was so important to not have it be Donald Trump, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. So for all the people who were wondering, why not Donald Trump? I mean, people voted for him, and he didn't get the overall popular vote, but he won in these Rust Belt states, et cetera, and he got more votes than Kasich did in the primaries. So why was Trump's candidacy so extraordinary that you felt you had to do this move?
Mayor Michael Signer spoke a lot about that. He wrote 2 articles in the Times and in Vox that Donald Trump was a demagogue, wasn't fit for office. I think the foreign influences are an important issue to look at, and it talks about in the Federalist 68 papers written by Alexander Hamilton. You have the emoluments issues, and even right now, more concerning is his nuclear proliferation rhetoric, saying that if there's an arms race, so be it. I mean, that's, to me, kind of scary. So, that fact that his finger is going to be on the trigger, and he may be like most Republicans who tend to be trigger happy, this very well presents a clear and present danger to our republic.
So both on constitutional issues, because the clause that you mentioned there is in the Constitution, it says you cannot get enriched by foreign powers. And it appears as the president-elect, he got busy trying to get enriched by foreign powers. He already showed his hand in that case. And also because, as Hamilton himself said, Alexander Hamilton, talking about the Electoral College, he wanted these electors to be a check as part of the checks and balances if a man who was unstable were to assume the office or was on the precipice of assuming the office of the presidency. So those are the 2 principal reasons you did it.
I think there's a number of other issues surrounding Donald Trump, but I don't believe the role of the Electoral College as it currently exists is to debate the issues surrounding the president. That's why it had to be a Republican. There's no way you were going to get 37 Republicans to vote for any Democrat, much less Hillary Clinton. So again, the issues I don't think we're trying to debate. We're trying to determine his fitness to serve and his ability to lead our country in times of war and in times of peace. And I don't think he's able to do that. Now that he's officially the president-elect, I do hope us all the best. And I hope he knows something we all don't.
So, Michael, I'm going to leave it on this note. I think that what you've done is something not only very interesting, but possibly historic, because the Democrats keep losing the Electoral College. They've 2 out of the last 5 elections, even though they won the popular vote. But the Democratic Party is so monumentally and sadly weak that they can't muster up enough of a fight to get rid of the Electoral College. In reality, they could get red states behind them. Alabama and Mississippi, their vote never, ever, ever counts in a presidential election. And if you're a deep conservative living in those states, in Oklahoma and Texas, you should be outraged by that, right? And you should band together to make sure that your vote counts. But this Democratic Party is never going to do it. The Republican Party thinks this is fantastic. We keep losing in a democracy and somehow wind up with power anyway. So my proposal is a little bit more controversial than yours. I didn't know you were going to do what you did, and I love that you asked Hillary Clinton to come on the Young Turks to discuss DAPL and the other issues you mentioned. But now that I know that this is possible, I'm for chaos at the Electoral College level. I'm for destroying it from within. So I am calling, now that we see the possibilities here for not one person, but for 50 people next time. Close to 10% or maybe even more of the Electoral College to be prepared to vote in a different direction next time around. Until people go, this is insane. We can't have this Electoral College constantly overturning the will of the people. And we can't have these electors going around and overturning the will of the American people too. We need to have an actual democracy. We call ourselves, the home of the free and the brave and the home of democracy. And we don't even have a democracy. So this is why participating at the local level is so important. I'm telling the whole audience right now, do as Michael did, go and become an elector, get involved in the process, become an elector, and when the time comes, we'll see what we want to do with those votes. People don't realize how large the TYT army is. So if we've got, I know we have 80 million unique viewers, and I know that a lot of them care deeply about politics. If we get enough of those electors in, we could destroy this insane, antiquated system from within. So if you thought this was interesting, wait till you get a load of the next Electoral College. Michael?
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
Yes. So I kind of wonder if I should run for an elector next year or in 4 more years, if that system is in play. Depending on the legal cases, I mean, we had more deflections away from either presidential candidate most since 1800. There was over 15 people that either voted for somebody else or was disqualified, myself included, which I'm going to fight to get my vote heard. But I do hope that this created enough of an issue that this does get heard in the Supreme Court over these next 4 years so that we can go and be a true democracy and allow, when you vote, allow that voice to be heard. So I think that's just something important. And, I believe I would support most of your endeavors.
Right. And of course, everybody's got slightly different opinions. Michael's opinion is his own. My opinion is my own. But Michael, I want to thank you for being part of this historic movement. You were among the first electors to revolt. And so, like you said, there was 15 this time. Next time, I guarantee you there'll be more. And we might vote as a block. So that could be plenty enough to swing any election. Because we have got to bring democracy back to America where it belongs. Michael Baca, thank you so much for joining us on the Young Turks.
Yep, thank you so much. It's an honor.
Thank you. Fix the media, be the media. Come join us. tytnetwork.com/join.